Would Donald Trump consider and make a visit to the south side of Chicago?
You know what? Mr. Trump will be coming here in the next 24 hours, and I will have a conversation with him about it. I think it's a great suggestion, and I will certainly talk with Mr. Trump. He's willing to go anywhere so that he can improve the conditions of African Americans.
Bill Hemmer asking a Trump advisor about why no one is going to a neighborhood so desperately needing help. And this is just an example of some of the questions asked about what actually solves the crime problem in America's third largest city, as we're getting some disturbing new crime statistics from the Chicago Police Department. As of the beginning of this month, Chicago recorded 479 murders this year. That's up 46% from the same period last year. But my next guest says it's not the murder numbers we should really be looking at, but the shootings. Joining me now, Kass, columnist for the Chicago Tribune. And John, you wrote about this issue. I know you've been at the Chicago Tribune now since the early 1980s, and you've seen a lot. Why
1890s.
Why is it the shootings that you think are the most important number to look at?
The reason the murders now, I think we're over 500. The murders don't tell you the whole story. Because of advances in medicine, you know, the emergency medical technicians, the paramedics, and so forth, the emergency rooms, the trauma centers, all this keep people alive. We've had 3,000 shootings already.
You know what's interesting
3,000
about that number? I was keeping up a few of your columns on the screen at the same time as I was preparing for this segment, and I was reading a great column you wrote about 9/11. And in that column you mentioned the nearly 3,000 Americans that were killed that day. But when I looked back at your column about Chicago, it dawned on me that nearly 3,000 people in Chicago have been shot just since the beginning of this year. I mean, it's a shocking statistic.
It's terrible, and the politics are all wrong, you know. President Obama doesn't want to highlight this. Hillary Clinton doesn't want to highlight this. I heard, you know, through the earpiece that there's some buzz about Donald Trump coming in. But really, there's a disconnect locally with the politics here. You have a mayor who is wounded politically. Weakened by the Laquan McDonald situation. Remember that, with the young man shot 16 times by the white cop. You have all sorts of things going on where the cops they won't make street stops.
Well, and some are calling
the street stops are down 80%.
Some are calling that the Ferguson effect, saying that cops, not only in the city of Chicago but elsewhere, are, quite frankly, nervous, anxious about making some of the stops that they normally would have, second-guessing themselves because they're worried about winding up on video, making an error, and that's stopping them from doing some of the more active police work. Now, others say that's stopping cops from doing other things that they shouldn't. How do you see it, John?
I think that if you're in the communities, you want police officers protecting your life from thugs who are shooting. There's really about 1,500 or so repeat offenders who are in Chicago in these 5 districts that do much of the shooting, at least from the police algorithms that they track. And those people have to be stopped. And the cops have to be aggressive, but they don't want to be aggressive. And the mayor didn't want to be aggressive because he wanted to get elected. And now you have this whole cascading effect, and we have people being shot down. Not only gang bangers, as we call them, but also 9-year-old babies being brought into an alley, assassinated.
Well,
9-year-olds.
That's a horrible story. For our viewers that don't know, this is just the cliff notes of it. And basically, it was competing members of different gangs, and one of them lured the son of a rival gang into an alley and shot the boy.
Jenna.
I mean, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it because it's just horrible.
He's not the only one, Jenna. He's not the only one. There have been other little children targeted that way.
Here's the frustration, though, John, is that, you know, the media, the national media, sort of like fireflies with this Chicago story. If there's a big story, we all sort of hover around it, and then we all back off of it when the light goes out and it gets dark, right, in the neighborhood. And so it makes me wonder what role the outside has for your city. Is there a role of the outside world of Chicago, or is it really something, a solution that has to happen internally?
I think what has to happen is that people have to call things what it is. It's not gun violence. We keep calling it gun violence. There are many guns in the suburbs. People aren't killing each other. What we're talking about is gang violence. gang violence and the fracturing of the old gangs, the large ones, into smaller cliques that are murderous. And that has to be dealt with. And people have to talk about the root causes. What are they? Of course, from the left, I could tell you jobs, and from the right, I could tell you family and the welfare state. But all these things combine, and the fact is that the politics of this country don't want to look at Chicago in that light, because I think President Obama's from Chicago. People don't want to, put him on the spot, and at the same time, people are dying.
Just real quick before I let you go, I have to ask you this not only as someone that's worked in the city, as I mentioned, for more than 30 years, but also as a dad. You have some perspective on the city that a lot of us don't have. At this point, is it comparable to other times that you've seen in Chicago that the city has recovered from, or is it a completely different moment?
We've had times of more homicides. We've had 940 homicides in a year. But what we have this time is a political weakening in which the mayor, who's trying to rehabilitate himself, rehabilitate his image with African-American voters, is trying hard as he can. But at the same time, the politics are shaky. So that adds, and the police are now afraid. So I've never seen that before in Chicago.
Well, it's something we want to continue to watch, John, and we appreciate through the viewpoint of your column, and I really appreciate having you on the program as always. So we look forward to having you back as we continue to watch. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jenna.